Let's get straight to Mark Leibovich. He is the chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine and a CBS News political contributor. And he joins us now from Washington. Mark, let's just begin with a broad general impression from your standpoint of what we heard in today's hearing. What stood out to you?
What stood out to me? I think clearly, it seems like a fairly broad and compelling consensus that, I didn't hear a lot of, based on the questions from the senators, any real skepticism that Russia was behind this. Certainly there were a lot of questions. I thought straight off Senator McCain's statement about Russia, about stopping hacking such as this, his conclusions seemed pretty firm, stood out. And also him putting the question to Mr. Clapper about whether, what he believed, Julian Assange's role was. And, they were also very strong against him. So I think this clearly was a clarifying moment. I didn't see much of a groundswell either way in the other direction.
To that question that Senator McCain asked about Julian Assange, he asked whether or not Assange put American lives in danger, and Clapper responded that he did. What sort of position do you think this puts President-elect Trump when you consider that he had been tweeting out statements made by Assange earlier, and he's put out a statement. Right. Well, yeah, and he tweeted today, hey, look, the media once again is sort of twisting my words. I was just repeating what Assange said. Doesn't mean he didn't say this, but, he's suggesting that it doesn't mean he supported Assange. But, what sort of position do you think it puts Trump in?
Well, Trump, it's unclear whether Trump's tweet this morning was walking that back, was hedging his bets a little bit. The tweet came before the hearings today. I think it's a very, very strange bedfellow. About 6-7 years ago, Trump and Sean Hannity and a lot of his allies, that namely, a lot of people on Fox actually were condemning in the strongest possible terms Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. And now it seems like they're being supportive of a position that Donald Trump has been pushing, and so the other side seems more compelling to him. I don't know how he continues to finesse this. Especially as he becomes president. When he's actually sworn in, he is not only going to own these investigations and be spearheading where this all goes, but also, this is his intelligence agency. These will be the people he is working with. And, is Julian Assange going to continue to be an ally of his going forward? It's a very, very strange thing. And I think the tweets have muddied the waters a little bit, and I think that's sort of been part of the MO from the beginning.
Mark, there was also an exchange there with Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. He's a Democrat, asking about those tweets. And Director Clapper saying, that I've received many expressions of concern from foreign counterparts of what's been interpreted as a disparagement of the intelligence community. What did you make of that?
Well, I think he was probably speaking, out of some frustration. I assume he's heard similar sentiments of support domestically, not just from foreign intelligence agencies. And it puts him in a tough position because he does not want to be seen as disloyal or even, combative with an incoming commander-in-chief, his future boss. But at the same time, he's got to defend his work and his people. And I think you do get a sense that he's sort of channeling his own frustration through what he says are the voices of other people.
Yeah, and it was interesting at one point, Director Clapper saying, walking that fine line that you're talking about, saying that he doesn't want motivated people that are motivated to serve their country, to do the right thing, to feel discouraged because they feel that their work is not being valued.
Right. I think the bigger issue, other than what James Clapper says at a public hearing today, will be what the actual rank and file in the intelligence community, what their reaction to this is over time, especially after President-elect Trump becomes President Trump. This could create all kinds of morale issues. It could create all kinds of, potential motivations to leak. It could, again, create a much bigger sort of, not bureaucratic morass, but sort of a collision of many, many different kinds of motivations. And, it could make Donald Trump's job a lot harder than it already is. And obviously it's a big challenge going in. So, we'll see where that winds up. But I think right now, clearly the intelligence community is either somewhere on notice or very sort of miffed at what some of this rhetoric has been coming out of, the Twitter account from President-elect Trump.
Yeah, speaking about the intelligence community being on notice, the other big story that we have been talking about going into this hearing today had to do with whether or not the Trump administration was going to overhaul the intelligence community, whether there was going to be some downsizing. And now we're hearing from the Trump transition team that that's not true at all. It's 100% false.
Right.
There's no plans to change anything. You know, what's your take on how this story has played out over the last 24 hours or so?
Well, I mean, the Trump people have, and I assume will again, blame the media for getting this wrong. There have, to be fair, been conflicting reports, and the notion that you can just sort of snap your fingers and overhaul or even reorganize a large, both bureaucratic and sort of administrative apparatus is a pipe dream. I think clearly, I mean, there's need for reform at every level of government. I think President Obama himself would say that. I think, again, though, I mean, the question is, does Donald Trump at this point know enough to actually be putting in place, or at least putting in place plans to actually install some kind of overhaul of this nature? I mean, it looks, we'll see where it ends up, but I think at this point, this is a headache that they don't really want to be taking on because they have a lot of other stuff to deal with.
Mark, let me ask you this. Senator Tom Cotton, he's a Republican from Arkansas, pressed Director Clapper as well as Admiral Rogers about the possible motives behind the Russian attack. He seemed to be, through his line of questioning, trying to indicate that it was the media that had put forth the idea that somehow if Russia was behind these cyber attacks, that they were behind them to somehow support the election of Donald Trump. Obviously, Director Clapper saying that they are not going to get into the motives right now. But Senator Cotton seemed to be indicating that that was coming from the media, that the media was somehow building this up. Is it your sense in talking to your sources that we're going to continue to get some political, the word I can always struggle with.
Politicization?
Yes,
Something along those lines?
yes, of this.
I hate that word.
I know,
Yes,
me too. It's
too
one
many
of the words you should
syllables.
never pronounce on television. Are we going to see this politicized continuously by both sides of the aisle as this report comes out from these intelligence communities?
Yeah, I mean, it's political to begin with. I mean, that would probably be true in any day and age. I mean, I think what's interesting about Tom Cotton's posture here is he has been very consistent and extremely firm in his critiques of Russia in general. I mean, not just the hacks, but just their conduct over the last 8-10 years, long before Tom Cotton himself was elected to the Senate. What he seems to be trying to do here is to disintermediate his own, very hard, hawkish line against Russia with the more maybe parochial political perspective on this argument, which is, well, the Russians did this because they want to help Trump, and therefore anyone who wants to take a hard line on the Russians must be against Trump. I mean, I think in some ways he's trying to not have it both ways, but certainly try to make a distinction between, what he considers a very, very long and legitimate rap sheet against the Russian government versus, again, a fairly black or white and shallow view of what a potential motivation of something like this might be.
So Rex Tillerson's confirmation hearing as Secretary of State is coming up. Do you expect that today's hearing and the report that we'll hopefully be hearing about next week will have some sort of impact on his confirmation hearing?
I think it could. I mean, I think Russia will be a central issue to Rex Tillerson's confirmation hearings no matter what. I mean, I think that was probably the number one issue going in, his close ties through Exxon with Vladimir Putin, the Russian government, the long sort of extensive record of business that he's done over there. I think this sort of bolsters a lot of that. I mean, I think in some ways everything that is transacted this week becomes something that Rex Tillerson will have to answer for next week, conceivably, or at least be asked about. So, I mean, I think, again, Russia, we're sort of creating a body of recent information about Russia. It sounds, at least based on what we're hearing today, to be something of a pretty strong indictment. And again, the degree to which Rex Tillerson can finesse that, I think, will go a long way to sort of to showing how he does and how his prospects go forward.
Clearly, Mark, before we let you go, this hearing obviously is going to continue. We're going to bring our viewers back to it. But at one point, Director Clapper saying that the cyber threat cannot be eliminated. So once these hearings are done, once we get to the bottom of this, all eyes, I guess, now on President-elect Trump, soon to be President Trump, as to how we combat this. It's not going to be so much looking backwards as it is looking forwards. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about intelligence is there's just a lot of gray area. There's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, we're sort of trying to impose the black and white, very, very sort of 140 character tweet notion of the world onto what is a many, many variable process, a process that is very detailed, has a lot of conflicting reports, has a lot of factors, a lot of things just to consider. So, I mean, in a way, it's an apples to oranges kind of thing. But look, this is the world we live in, and I mean, yeah, are you ever 100% sure of anything over something like this? Of course not. It's been proven again and again, within any number of intelligence organizations. But again, what we're talking about is a news cycle, a kind of narrative that doesn't allow for the kinds of gray areas that I think is in reality here. So again, I mean, I think people will sort of look to impose their own kind of spin on this, but it's a complicated process, and there's really no avoiding that.
All right, Mark Leibovich of the New York Times Magazine. As always, Mark, we thank you for your analysis.
Thanks, guys.